Every single day, digital startups are out there just burning through millions of dollars, fighting for like a fraction of an inch on your phone screen.
Oh, yeah, just constantly bidding against each other.
Exactly. Driving up digital ad costs, all just to get one sponsored post into your social media feed. But it turns out the most valuable, most exclusive real estate for a digital-first brand isn't actually on the internet at all.
No, it's really not.
It's a 12-inch section of metal shelving at, your local grocery store or electronics store. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way.
Thanks. And yeah, that physical shelf is the ultimate bottleneck. I mean, online, a brand can list 10,000 products in an afternoon without asking anyone for permission.
Right. The virtual shelf is just infinite.
Exactly. But a physical store has walls. Space is finite. And earning the right to occupy a tiny rectangle of that space requires a level of, operational maturity that most digital startups just do not have.
Which brings us to the really fascinating tension we're unpacking in this deep dive. Because in an era where building a direct-to-consumer website seems so completely frictionless, why would a modern brand voluntarily subject itself to the agony of physical retail?
It's a great question.
Right. To answer this, we're pulling from a really definitive guide published by Retailbound. This is a consultancy led by their founder, Johann Jacob, and they manage the retail presence for brands across over 150 major retailers in the U.S. and Canada.
So they really have a front row seat to the carnage and, of course, the triumphs of actually getting on the shelf.
Yeah. The guide functions as a playbook for why startups absolutely need to launch in retail. But more importantly, it exposes the hidden, often fatal traps waiting for them when they try. It's this unvarnished look at the mechanics of scaling a physical product.
And that is exactly what we are going to break down for you today.
Yeah. So whether you're an entrepreneur trying to map out your next major growth phase, a marketer trying to understand how physical and digital strategies actually collide, or, just a curious consumer wondering how that super specific new tech gadget ended up in the aisle at Target, this deep dive is going to fundamentally change the way you look at a store shelf.
We really need to start by looking past the products themselves. When you walk into a store, you aren't just looking at plastic and cardboard.
Right.
You're looking at the survivors of an intense logistical and financial gauntlet.
Well, let's start with the why. Because, the prevailing narrative for the last decade has been that brick-and-mortar retail is dying, right? Like everything is shifting to e-commerce.
That's certainly the popular narrative, yeah.
Yet this source argues that fighting for physical shelf space is the ultimate growth multiplier. Why subject yourself to that?
What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanism of instant brand credibility.
Okay, credibility.
Right. Think about how a consumer's brain works in a physical aisle. When they see a completely unknown startup's product sitting shoulder to shoulder with a legacy brand, something they've trusted for 20 years, they subconsciously transfer that established trust to the newcomer.
Oh, wow.
The retailer is effectively acting as a curator, telling the shopper, we vetted this, it's safe to buy.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because it's basically the real-world equivalent of getting a verified blue check mark on a social media profile, but with actual financial stakes attached.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Right, because on the internet, anybody can build a slick Shopify store that makes them look like a massive corporation.
Yeah.
Even if they're like literally shipping out of a damp basement.
Exactly.
But a physical shelf placement proves that a buyer at a massive retail chain looked at your financials, your supply chain, your product, and decided you were legitimate.
And that validation creates a halo effect. The source points out that this physical credibility doesn't just stay trapped inside the store. It actually boosts the brand's conversion rates on their own website.
Why, really?
Oh, absolutely. And on their Amazon listings, too. People see it in the store, remember the name, and they just feel safer buying it online later.
I buy the blue checkmark analogy, but I have to push back here a little bit. Getting onto a physical shelf involves shipping entire pallets of inventory, right? You're negotiating wholesale discounts, risking chargebacks if things go wrong.
Oh, the risks are very real.
Isn't that incredibly expensive and risky compared to just, spinning up some highly targeted Facebook or Google ads? If I just want credibility and visibility, paying for clicks seems infinitely easier to control.
Easier to start, perhaps. But you have to consider the long-term math. Digital advertising operates on a treadmill.
Okay, a treadmill.
Yeah. The moment you stop paying for ads, your visibility drops to zero. You're constantly just renting eyeballs. Physical retail, however, functions as a highly effective, permanent offline billboard.
A billboard that people can actually buy from.
Exactly. You have thousands of shoppers walking past your product every single day.
But a highway billboard doesn't require me to overhaul my entire manufacturing pipeline, and risk bankrupting my company with unfulfilled purchase orders. It feels like comparing apples to very dangerous oranges.
It's a fair point. But you really have to look at how customer acquisition costs play out over time. With digital ads, your cost per acquisition is constantly rising due to algorithm changes, competition, all of that.
Right, it gets more expensive every year.
Exactly. In retail, yes, you are giving up a chunk of your profit margin to the store. You're essentially paying them a wholesale discount. But in exchange, the store provides a sustained daily volume of foot traffic that would cost a fortune to replicate through digital ads.
So over time, that offline visibility stabilizes your customer acquisition costs.
Precisely.
And beyond just the math of acquiring customers, there is a biological reality the source emphasizes. We are humans. We still have a deeply ingrained demand for tactile experiences.
This is a critical factor. For so many categories, electronics, cosmetics, apparel, even high-end cookware, people fundamentally need to touch, weigh, compare, and test a product.
We need to feel it.
Right, before they feel comfortable swiping their credit card.
Yeah, think about the last time you bought a pair of expensive noise-canceling headphones. You probably wanted to feel the weight of them, see if the plastic felt cheap, or test how the hinges folded.
Exactly. A glossy, high-definition photo on a website just cannot replicate the sensory input your brain needs to justify a $200 purchase.
It really can't.
And providing that first-hand tactile experience significantly boosts consumer confidence, which drastically increases the likelihood of a sale.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, these physical stores serve as a real-world laboratory for the startup. Before a company commits to a massive nationwide expansion, launching in a few regional stores provides invaluable market feedback.
Oh, that's interesting. You can actually watch humans interact with your product in the wild. You get to see if they understand the packaging, if they balk at the price, or if they struggle to open the box.
Exactly. That kind of behavioral data is impossible to get from, a heat map on a website.
Which brings us to the operational reality of this whole endeavor. If this physical presence spikes your visibility and builds massive trust, what happens to the underlying business model?
This is where things get tricky.
Right. Because if a brand suddenly gets this offline billboard effect, their basement shipping operation is going to buckle under the pressure overnight. So how does the business actually survive that transition?
It forces an evolution from variable revenue to predictable volume. In direct-to-consumer e-commerce, a startup relies on onesie-twosie sales.
Onesie-twosie.
Yeah. The daily volume fluctuates wildly based on ad performance or, a viral social media post. But the moment you secure retail distribution, the language of the business changes to larger purchase orders.
Okay, it's the difference between selling cups of lemonade on a sidewalk to individual passersby versus securing a contract to sell entire barrels of lemonade to a regional distributor every single month.
That's a great analogy.
When you're selling by the cup, your cash flow is a guessing game.
Hmm.
When you sell by the barrel, you know exactly how much cash is coming in and exactly when you need to squeeze the lemons.
And that predictability fundamentally alters a startup's manufacturing efficiency. When a buyer commits to ordering 10,000 units every quarter, you can finally negotiate better rates with your factory.
Oh, of course, economies of scale.
Right. You can lock in cheaper raw materials because you are buying in bulk. The entire supply chain becomes streamlined.
And you aren't just selling more volume to your existing fans, right? You are actually capturing a completely different kind of shopper. The guide mentions that retail captures active intent in a way the internet often misses.
Yeah, we tend to assume everyone just searches Google for what they need. But a massive segment of the population discovers solutions simply by walking down a store aisle.
Just browsing.
Exactly. They might have a problem, say, they need a better way to organize their cables, but they aren't actively searching for it online. Then they walk through the electronics section, see a well-designed cable management product, and buy it on impulse.
So retail introduces the product to shoppers who are completely outside the startup's digital net. And according to Retailbound, securing that first major retailer triggers what they call a momentum effect.
The industry runs on proven success. Once you demonstrate that your product can actually move off the shelf at a mid-size retailer, the larger dominoes start to fall.
Buyers talk to each other.
Oh, constantly. Buyers at national chains talk to each other. They watch the market very closely.
So it's not just about getting the first win, it's about proving you can handle the logistics of the big leagues. Which makes me wonder if the upside is this massive predictable revenue, better factory pricing, and nationwide credibility. Why doesn't every successful Shopify brand just march into a corporate headquarters and demand shelf space?
Well, you can try.
I imagine a buyer just wants to see a product that makes a lot of profit.
Right.
Right.
Profit potential is important, yes. But a buyer's biggest motivation is actually fear.
Fear.
Yes. This raises an important question about what retail buyers actually care about. The ultimate barrier to entry isn't how cool your gadget is, it's whether your company is operationally mature enough to not create a disaster for the store.
A disaster meaning what? The product doesn't sell.
No, the true nightmare for a retail buyer is an empty shelf.
Ah.
If your supply chain hiccups and you can't deliver the inventory you promised, you leave a gaping hole in their aisle. That empty space generates zero revenue per square foot for the retailer.
And it just looks terrible.
Exactly. It damages the store's credibility with its own shoppers. So buyers aren't just evaluating your product, they are heavily evaluating your ability to consistently deliver without disrupting their highly optimized ecosystem.
So how does a scrappy startup actually prove they won't cause an empty shelf disaster? The guide lays out a pretty intense checklist for operational readiness. And it starts long before you even pitch the product.
It definitely does.
It starts with targeting. You have to know precisely who your consumer is so you can pitch the right store. You don't just want any retailer. You want the one whose foot traffic perfectly aligns with your target demographic.
Because if you place a high-end premium product in a discount retailer, the sell-through rate, meaning the speed at which the inventory is actually purchased by consumers, will be abysmal.
Right.
But targeting is just the first step. Let's look at the mechanics of two of the biggest hurdles on the Retailbound checklist: pricing margins and packaging.
Okay, I want to dig into the margins because I think a lot of newer founders get the math completely wrong. They figure, hey, it costs me $10 to make this. I sell it on my website for $20, so I'll just sell it to the retailer for $20 and they can figure it out.
That math will literally get you laughed out of a buyer's office.
Wow. Really?
Oh, yeah. Retailers have strict margin requirements, often demanding a 30 to 50% profit margin just to carry your item.
50%.
Sometimes, yes. So if your product retails for $40 on the shelf, the retailer expects to buy it from you for $20. If your manufacturing and shipping costs are $15, that leaves you with just $5 of profit per unit.
Oh, man. Which means a startup has to reverse engineer their entire pricing strategy before they pitch.
Exactly.
You have to prove to the buyer that you can sell it to them at a deep wholesale discount, still make enough profit yourself to stay in business, and keep the final shelf price competitive with the legacy brands sitting right next to you.
Yep. If that math doesn't work perfectly, the conversation is completely over.
Then there's the packaging. In e-commerce, a plain brown cardboard box is perfectly fine because the website did the selling. The box just needs to survive the mail. But in retail, your packaging is a 3-second silent salesperson.
That's a great way to put it.
It has to grab attention in a visually overwhelming environment, communicate exactly what the product does instantly, and justify the price point. But it also has to protect the product, stack efficiently on a shelf, and sometimes even act as the theft deterrent. It's an incredibly complex piece of physical marketing.
It really is. And this brings us to what might be the most fascinating and counterintuitive revelation in the entire guide.
Okay, lay it on me.
The fundamental misunderstanding of who is actually responsible for selling the product once it's on the shelf.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. This blew my mind. I think the prevailing assumption is that a startup fights tooth and nail to get into a store, and once the product is physically sitting on the shelf, the startup can finally relax.
That is the assumption, yes.
The mentality is, I got it into the store, now it's the store's job to sell it to their customers.
Mm-hmm.
But the source explicitly says this is a fatal trap.
It is the absolute quickest way to get your product discontinued. Retailers provide the real estate and the baseline foot traffic, but they absolutely expect the brand to generate the specific demand for that product.
This is the marketing paradox. Even though you are giving the retailer a massive cut of your profits, you still have to invest heavily in your own marketing just to drive traffic into their store.
Consider the mechanics of it. You might run a targeted Instagram ad campaign, but instead of linking it to your own website where you keep 100% of the profit, you explicitly tell the consumer to go buy it at their local branch of the retailer.
Which sounds crazy, right? Why on earth would a startup pay for an ad just to send the customer to a middleman?
Because the conversion rate of a physical visit is astronomically higher than a web click. Oh, yeah. If your digital marketing gets someone to actually walk into a store, they are highly likely to buy. Furthermore, driving traffic to the retailer ensures your product turns over quickly, which keeps the retail buyer happy, secures your spot on the shelf, and leads to those massive, predictable purchase orders we talked about earlier.
Wow. So you're running SEO, managing influencers, handling PR, and funding digital ads, all to fuel the retailer's cash register. It completely flips the script on what physical retail actually is.
Huh.
You aren't handing off the marketing baton to the store, you're just carrying a much heavier baton.
And that heavy baton leads directly to the concept of omnichannel dynamics.
Right.
Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, even if you get the margins right, nail the packaging, and run brilliant ads, the physical and digital worlds are going to violently collide right there in the middle of the aisle.
Omnichannel, which essentially means ensuring your website, your social media, and your physical store presence are all communicating a seamless, unified message. Because the modern consumer journey is almost never purely offline anymore.
No, it's not. If you look at the Retailbound data, they highlight a very specific behavior: the aisle search.
The aisle search.
Yeah. A shopper discovers your brand new product on a physical shelf. They're holding your brilliant 3-second silent salesperson packaging, but before they put it in their cart, they pull out their phone right there in the store and they Google your company.
Oh, you've probably done this yourself. I do it constantly. I see a new coffee maker or a smart home device at the store. I pick it up and immediately look it up on my phone to see if the reviews are actually any good.
Everyone does it. And that specific moment is where countless startups crash and burn.
Why?
Because the shopper searches for your brand, and if they find a clunky website that takes 10 seconds to load, lacks clear product information, or has 0 customer reviews, the illusion of credibility shatters, they will put the box right back on the physical shelf and walk away.
So your digital presence has to be absolutely flawless to close the in-store sale. The guide lists out the requirements, right? A mobile-optimized design because the search is happening on a phone in an aisle, blazing fast load speeds, high-quality images, and robust educational content that answers any question the physical box couldn't fit.
Exactly. This is why the guide lists inadequate preparation as the primary killer of startups in retail. Founders pitch buyers before they have the manufacturing capacity locked in.
Right.
They set pricing without factoring in the retailer's margin. They fail to allocate a budget for driving in-store demand. Or they treat their website as a secondary priority once they get a retail contract.
Because you only get one chance to make a first impression with a major retail buyer. If your supply chain fails and you leave them with an empty shelf, or if your product just sits there collecting dust because you didn't market it, you aren't just kicked out of that store. Word travels. You could be locking yourself out of physical distribution entirely.
So what does this all mean? Moving into retail is not an escape from the digital grind. It is an amplifier that forces a company to execute flawlessly in the physical world and the digital world simultaneously.
So bringing this all together, the core insight here is that launching in retail is still an unparalleled growth multiplier. It delivers instant credibility, massive predictable revenue streams, and captures shoppers you would literally never reach online. But the cost of that growth is a fundamental structural transformation of the business.
You have to evolve from being a scrappy product maker, someone just fulfilling one-off orders online, into a highly organized, operationally mature partner.
Yeah.
Success on a retail shelf doesn't happen by accident. It is the result of meticulous margin math, tight supply chains, and a relentless omnichannel marketing strategy.
It really reframes the entire shopping experience. Like the next time you are pushing a cart down the aisles of a major retailer, take a second to really look at the products around you. You won't just see neatly arranged boxes anymore. You'll be looking at companies that survived a brutal logistical, financial, and marketing gauntlet just to earn the right to sit in front of you.
They fought for that 12 inches of metal, and they proved they could hold it.
They really did.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I do want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Something you can explore on your own that builds on what we've talked about today.
Let's hear it.
So the entire premise of this Retailbound guide relies on the fact that physical retail is valuable because human beings have a hardwired need to see, touch, and test a product in the real world. We need that sensory validation before we buy.
Right, absolutely.
But as augmented reality and artificial intelligence rapidly evolve, we are approaching a threshold where technology can simulate incredibly realistic tactile and visual experiences right in our own living rooms.
Oh,
When the day comes that you can put on a headset, virtually place a product on your kitchen counter, view it in perfect 3D, and interact with its features as if it were physically there, will that finite retail shelf eventually lose its premium status as the ultimate brand validator?
that is a fascinating question.
Or, in a completely digital AI-saturated world, will having a tangible physical presence in a real-world building become an even rarer, more exclusive luxury for a brand? Just something to chew on the next time you're standing in an aisle inspecting a box and pulling out your phone.